are back. It's been a couple weeks since Loki, but we are back with another weekly water cooler conversation. This time, talking all things what if. Now, we've done these in the past where it's cumulative, where each episode feeds into the other. It's obviously an overarching show, and therefore spoilers are a big deal. This show is an anthology show, and each episode is going to be different. I believe that there is permanent ramifications on the MCU from these episodes, but in between episodes, you don't necessarily need to have watched 1 to watch 2 to watch 3, etc., etc. So we'll be talking about spoilers from each individual episode as we go along. So this episode of our weekly water cooler conversation is going to be full spoilers for episode 1, which is all about Captain Carter. If you don't want anything revealed, because there are naturally twists and turns due to it being a what if, do come back and watch this video later. We'll be diving into everything from the opening to the end of this beautiful 30 minutes of animation. If you guys haven't checked out my Loki weekly water cooler conversations, had a total blast with that. Before that, we did Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and before that, we of course broke down WandaVision. Now, when Peacemaker comes out, we'll be covering that one. When there's another show, like an indie show that isn't one of the big two, that doesn't overlap with one of the big two, be covering those as well. So it's there's lots and lots of stuff. For now, it's been Marvel heavy just because they've put out the Marvel shows first, so Marvel Studios has these weekly water coolers attention until we get Peacemaker and those other shows. So the goal is to do these bigger somewhere. The goal is to have this live on Instagram for now, but eventually find a studio or a network or somewhere to bring this. So if you enjoy these, tell your friends, share it, comment, etc. It'll boost this thing, and I want to try to be doing these somewhere while the world hopefully reopens. Full spoilers, last warning for What If Episode 1, What If It Was Captain Carter. Now, broad strokes, the flavor of this is incredible. There's so many comics to read, there's so many movies to watch. So when I compare my experience with this, it's not to most other animation. Any references I make aren't to animation that we've already been exposed to, but with What If, I feel like this is going to impact things so much. I really need to be a part of this movement. I'm going to be diving into this show as a newbie to animation. All of those caveats aside, I love this visual style of animation. I really enjoyed the fact that it blends certain CGI elements into the foreground and the background. I love that it doesn't look cheap, where you can see which item in the frame is going to be used. Remember in like the 90s where the animation, you'd kind of like, there'd be a bunch of pebbles or something on the ground, and one pebble would have different cell shading. You'd be like, well, that's the thing that's going to move. There's none of that here. This all looks really fluid. This doesn't reveal any inexpensiveness. It looks very expensive. It also allows for action that is from the comic books that can't really exist in live action. The fights in this are both more fluid by lack of, physics and gravity, but also much more comic-like and in many ways more brutal than the movies could be. She fights like Winter Soldier, but without gravity holding her down in this whole show. And the sequence that really blew me away was there's this incredible Captain Carter riding on the back of the Hydra Stomper sequence that is just staggering in its beauty, stunning in its emotionality, and could not be done in live action. It is absolutely amazing, and it took my breath away. I was enamored and paused and just captivated by it. So the way I do this show is I watch it for me at night, either at midnight or at the break of dawn, and then I watch it a second time with notes. Both viewings of this before talking to you, I had to stop typing notes and just watch the air sequence because it was absolutely beautiful. And it's my favorite thing in this episode. I think it really set the bar for the animation for the rest of the series. I think it's a really great use of What If, because obviously she didn't become Captain America and he didn't become Hydra Stomper, so therefore that sequence would never exist. But also, I don't know if anything quite like that could exist. They followed her diving through the windows of airplanes and up and around, and like followed her feet as she ran and dove and did these very David Fincher CGI tracking shots, and all of that was stunning. Now, you're going to hear all about the animation from people the coming weeks. That's going to be the main point of conversation because it's an animated show. But I also want to give some love to the sound design. The sound design on this show is also stunning. The use of the shield sound effects to have some familiarity while also bringing us deeper into this world was genius. The way everything feels like it's got weight to it. I joked about the lack of physics because it's animated, but things do feel like they're weighted. It does feel like those punches are landing. It does feel like she's interacting with a real world. It all feels very tangible, even while it's animated. And that is really hard to do. And that's really hard for me, who's someone that's not generally watching this animated stuff, because I don't feel the weight of it. The weight of things is a big problem with me for animation, where it doesn't feel real, it doesn't feel tangible. This show, while stylized and obviously animated, has a weight to it where I feel invested in the actions and motivations of the characters, which I am very, very about in this show. Now, the other side of sound is the dubbing, the actors. This show, through its whole run, has many of the MCU coming back. Actors from the Marvel Cinematic Universe reprising their roles. What's tricky is voice acting and screen acting are very different. And sometimes a line will sound a little off because that might be delivered by a stage or TV or film actor, and it's a different skill set. You ask Mercer how to do this line, it's going to sound different than how, like, Evans does a line. And, you know, there's going to be different skills involved in the whole process. And I think there were a couple moments in the show where there were lines that sounded off only because of the medium, and I think that's just going to be an adjustment for a lot of these titans of acting on screen. Overall, it's great to hear a lot of our favorite actors from the cinematic universe reprising their roles, experiencing them in very new ways, experiencing different takes in their character, them as actors getting to play around with the character in ways they wouldn't have otherwise. You know, Bucky doesn't lose his arm. Bucky gets to have a life as Steve's best friend. Bucky doesn't become the Winter Soldier. It's really cool to hear him more positive, for example. We also get Dominic Cooper back as Howard Stark, which I love. I love his portrayal of Howard Stark. And we get more time with him. We also get to have him invent different things. There's a different playfulness to that character that's also very playful. And we find out next episode, you know, how Chadwick Boseman plays a more bro-y, more less regal T'Challa in one of his last performances. It's going to be really hard, but that does mean we get another performance, and a very different performance from not only T'Challa, but from the late, great Chadwick Boseman. So really cool opportunity to have these actors reprising their roles in a very different way. And those that did not reprise their roles, I really appreciated, like, the Chris Evans voice alike, the sound alike for Captain America. He didn't just sound like a Steve Rogers Captain America, he sounded like Chris Evans, and it was very impressive. Keeps you immersed, keeps you feeling like you're in this world. Bradley Whitford was in a one-shot. Bradley Whitford's character was not a big character. We got a lot more of him. He's an incredible actor. Hearing his voice come out of an animated character was a lot of fun for me as a West Wing fan. So things like that, really special about this show. I also love that we can explore parts of the MCU that we've dabbled in, and in doing a what if, one of the reasons the what if comics are so much fun is you get to strengthen the main universe by showing the alternate realities of choices made. So seeing a character make this choice reminds you why they wouldn't make that choice, and it makes the OG character stronger. And you can do that with the MCU here. You can make certain choices made land better by showing the alternative. And that's a really powerful thing about the multiverse. A really powerful thing about the opportunity to do this is we get to re-explore the MCU, which is fun and nostalgic, and somehow the MCU is 13 years old, which is insane, so it is nostalgic. But also we get to fortify these characters a bit more and discover more attributes about them and play with alternate realities, which is always a good time, while also doing impossible comic book arcs. We're going to be doing comic book arcs in this show that have never been done before in any other medium and couldn't be done in many other mediums. There's going to be so many things that you can't contract this actor to do this for a whole movie, for a whole storyline. The web of the MCU is so taut and so woven that there's a lot of, like, choices that'd be fun, but it would throw off XYZ. Guardians of the Galaxy is blessed with being its own cosmic thing tucked away in another little corner of the universe, so they have less ramifications. Say Doctor Strange makes a choice. Doctor Strange 2 is shaping up to be Avengers 5, so it's going to be, any choice he makes is going to affect all of the MCU, so you don't have that kind of freedom. With What If, all the freedom, infinite freedom, comic book freedom, story choice freedom, stories that Kevin Feige might have conceived over the last 13 years that he wanted to do might get to land here, plus stuff from the comic books, like I said, that we'd never see. So I think the concept of What If is landing very well. I think there's a lot of fun to be had with all of these options, and I do think that it's a really cool opportunity for comic book fans to see stuff they wouldn't see in another medium. Those are my broad thoughts, pre-spoilers. If you've stuck around, those are the non-spoiler thoughts. We're diving into spoilers, breaking it down. Here is what I've thought of episode 1 of Captain Carter doing awesome stuff. All right, so I dig the animation of the Marvel logo. It's a smart way to immerse us. We had a green logo for Loki. It's a familiar logo, so adding the animation, beautiful way to bring us into the world. I'm a big fan of the opening with Jeffrey Wright as the Watcher. Jeffrey Wright as the Watcher is inspired casting, and it immerses us right into all the options. We see a literal fractal glass of opportunity and potential and alternate realities right away. And Uatu, the Watcher that's most known in our universe, diving us in, guiding us, never interacting. The Watchers are never supposed to interact with the world. They're meant to watch. They often mess up their one rule, but in this case, we have the Watcher not messing with things and just watching. And I assume the season finale, we might hear all about the rules of the Watcher, how they're not supposed to be involved, and then I assume he's going to have to at some point, as often happens in the comics. But it's really great to have the Watcher guiding us as someone who loves that character very much. Oh, this art is gorgeous, very much my cup of tea. The cell shading is wicked smart and immersive while allowing for plenty of CGI backgrounds, foregrounds, and detail work. The use of cell shading makes you feel like you're not only in a comic book, but allows for a really fluid animation style, which I really dig. The voice actor doing Chris Evans, Steve Rogers, is nailing it. I mentioned that at the top, but I thought of it as soon as I started hearing him, and I was super impressed. Agent Carter, don't you think he'd be more comfortable in the booth? Asked by Stanley Tucci's Abraham Erskine, and that throwaway line from the original is the point of catalysm for this entire universe. The catalyst for everything is that line when she's like, nah. So the change in the comic books is always an exciting thing. Like, the what if of it all is the title of the comic book. So what if Spider-Man kept the black symbiote suit? What if the X-Men didn't go to Krakoa? They might do now in modern days. So it's really cool to see what the what if is, and in this case it's something innocuous that turns into a giant thing. The butterfly effect is, what if Peggy Carter didn't leave the room and everything changed? And her being such a strong, commanding, intelligent character, I love that that incident was all based on what she would have actually done in the room. What our universes, Haley Atwell, Peggy Carter would have done had she stayed, is a fascinating question which changes everything, and it's all off one innocuous line from Mr. Stanley Tucci. Stark, I push the button, is a great Howard Stark line. Him being a bit of a coward while also having a reason to stay outside, but yelling that he's the scientist, not the guy that goes in. I push the button. Great line, very character appropriate, and very excellently delivered by Dominic Cooper, which was so nice to have him back. Now, worth mentioning, Captain Carter, who's about to appear for the very first time in the MCU, does exist in the comic books. Captain Carter is from an issue of Exiles. Exiles is, how do I describe Exiles? Exiles is a team of comic characters from different dimensions all thrown together to solve multidimensional problems, but they are all different visual styles. They're all from different pocket universes. They're all from different multiverses. So imagine like a team of 5, but each one of them, kind of like the Lokis, is from a different universe, but you've got like a little tiny animated Wolverine from a cartoon with a Shakespearean etched art Hawkeye. Like, that's the team assembled. So it's really fascinating looking at the art of those Exiles books, and Exiles number 3 was the first appearance of Agent Carter in the comic books. She did appear in a board game just before that. It's in my Easter eggs. I'll read it to you. There's a board game she appeared in right before that, but her first comic book appearance is Exiles number 3. And I love having that great of a character in the MCU. And I guarantee you, Haley Atwell shows up as Captain Carter in the Multiverse of Madness. Even if it's just a panning shot, even if we just are diving through different multiverses, I guarantee we see Haley Atwell suited up because of how much weight they're putting on this pilot episode, because she's the only character from What If that we're confirmed to have back in the second season. They're making Captain Carter, I think, the animated Captain America, and they might even go through movie by movie and do recreations of what Winter Soldier would have been for her. Now, Winter Soldier doesn't exist, as we'll talk about in a second, but what that second installment of her story would have been. Would it have been the Serpent Society, which was the joke back in 2010? 2010, they made a joke at Comic-Con that it was going to be Serpent Society before they announced Winter Soldier. We all laughed. Cap has a lot of snake villains, and they could have done that. Wonder if they'll do that with the What If Captain Carter. I love the scenes chosen to mirror the original so far. The boxing sequence being what we're used to, and then the added element of all of the plates, 45-pound plates are called plates at the gym. The 45-pounders basically slammed into the far wall, a la a Captain America shield. Great addition to the visuals, great throwback to what we had with Avengers. Very, very good use of what if. The mention of the dance is already here, and it already hurts. They're talking about the dance. Now, the dance was a beautiful 12-year build-up to the end of a 3-phase saga. 23 movies led up to them dancing. They've mentioned the dance already here, and it's already painful. In-universe mention of the USO that never was. I love the what if of it all because it's really fun to watch what we already know. As I was saying, we build on these characters. So Steve Rogers mentioning the USO and Captain Carter being like, that would never happen. That's exactly what does happen. But in those times, in the 40s, they wouldn't have paraded around a woman as the face of America, so that's not what they do with her. They shelve this Captain America, whereas they propagandize Steve Rogers' Captain America. So that great little what if from one decision, but the mention of it through the USO, I thought was very clever. This action moves. I love that car flip. The action kicks off in a real way with this first sequence, the car flip, the brutality of the punches, the fluidity of the kicks, the way that the shield is used, the lack of having to rely on gravity and physics is a thing of beauty. I love the action in this first episode. Ooh, Tesseract allowing for Howard versus Tony to make an Iron Man suit first. So Howard Stark is the one that makes the suit this years before his son's even born. Howard Stark makes an accidental Ironmonger-esque suit because of the Tesseract. In the comic books, Howard was a genius that inspired many of the details that led to the Iron Man suit, but here he has a power source strong enough, like his son does later, to build an Iron Man suit, and his Ironmonger, unlike Tony's, wasn't built in a cave, so it's a lot more tech savvy, and it looks just like the Iron Giant, which I really enjoy. But I really love that Howard Stark makes an Iron Man suit and that Steve Rogers gets to be the one in the Iron Man suit, so we get the very important Captain America, in this case Captain Carter, Iron Man team up, which leads to that incredible flight sequence, which I love so very much. Again, I love this animation, the motorcycle toss like in Age of Ultron, but used here in a different way. Her jogging up to the motorcycle and saying, this is nice. The comedy of it, the levity of it, the style of it, the visual of it, and then references makes my continuity-loving comic nerd heart very happy. There's that Captain Carter name drop and a frame-for-frame Captain America First Avenger recreation with Peggy. They literally grabbed the frame from First Avenger, the push with all the Howling Commandos, and recreated it with Captain Carter, but animated after she said her name for the very first time. Big movie moments, big Rocketeer energy, a lot of great Joe Johnston flavor, but now animated. Much love for that. And the montage. I'm a sucker for a montage. I'm a big 80s guy, so in the first Avenger, we got like 3 montages of Captain America. We only got one this time because it's a 30-minute show, but we got an awesome montage of her training and becoming more and more Captain America, and that ends with the flight sequence. The flight sequence with Steve, Iron Man, and Peggy on his back airborne in this app is the highlight for me. More of that. I cannot wait to see more of the animation that blows our mind each episode that couldn't be done in another medium. I've talked about it this whole thing. I'm not going to keep talking about the flight sequence, or will I? I probably will. Hail Hydra escalation. We can revisit so much universe here. We got to see basically activation of a Hydra cell in a different way here. We got to see the original Tree of Life from the first Avenger with Red Skull back to looking vaguely human. We got to hear Ross Marquand, who took over the Red Skull duties, doing a great Hugo Weaving again, but with his German skin. So much revisiting that just nostalgic heart. The Howard, Peggy, Rogers dinner window scene is another highlight comedically. That little triangle of the 3 of them is beautiful. There's always a triangle with poor Steve and Peggy, but this time it's Howard. Loved that sequence. Very funny. And then the classic 40s like fade to a little circle. All of that set a really wonderful tone. The train sequence, the almost ripped my arm off. I understood that reference. That was a beautiful Winter Soldier almost ripped my arm off reference in that stunning train sequence. A lot of love for that. I like that we can do those things because the world knows these characters enough. It took 13 years, but now moms in Nebraska know Thanos. Your cousin knows about the Winter Soldier, and a reference like almost ripped my arm off would not have landed even 10 years ago. But now we live in a world where enough people know the Winter Soldier, they can make these little fun side references to a very, at the time, niche character. The Winter Soldier was super niche. Now he's everywhere. Very cool to see a little reference like that because we're so inundated in this world. Definitely thought we were getting a Steve Winter Soldier for a minute there. Maybe that happens in another ep. When he fell into the snow and got frozen, I really was like, is this how we get a different Winter Soldier? What if Steve became the Winter Soldier? What if someone as good and wholesome and just righteous as Steve got manipulated and brainwashed. Like, that'd be another fun what if, and I thought we might because of him falling off the train, much like we had with our Winter Soldier. Obviously, they didn't go that way. We got our Iron Man situation. What if Steve became Winter Soldier? That's the fun of this universe. You can do so many things. I love how in setup, taking down layer sequence, she fights like Cap did in Winter Soldier, way more offense. As she's learning with her skills, as we're getting up to the third act climax, there's a full Winter Soldier sequence. There's a full using the shield as a battering ram, a lot more aggressive and offensive in her violence. A lot of that really works here with this character and with this style of animation. Loving it very, very much. Red Skull getting immediately trounced in the universe as well. So the Red Skull very, very quickly gets attacked and mutilated. So once again in the MCU, our poor Red Skull, who is very, very terrifying and intimidating and a genius of evil, is not. We have yet to get a Red Skull that actually feels like the Red Skull comic book. I'm hoping that also does happen at some point in What If. I'd love to see, because we've had like ethereal, mystical, floating embodiment of death, very much like Jim Starlin's death, Red Skull, and then we've had like a little bit scary, but doesn't really get to be the Red Skull, Hugo Weaving Red Skull. He's kind of been a punchline. This was very much a punchline. I get always punch Nazis. I get that mentality. I get the way they're treating the Red Skull, but also the character is so important to the mythos of the comic books that I do hope we get both. I do hope at some point we get a Red Skull with a little bit more oomph. That way he can be terrifying, because the character himself is, even though Nazis suck and should just be a punchline. That is a little bit of a bummer that he's once again that in this, but we have plenty of story to tell with the Red Skull, especially now that we live in a multiverse. Who knows, we could get a whole Disney Plus show about Steve going back, redelivering the stones. Red Skull gets freed from his job watching over that Soul Stone and goes back to being the terrifying character he can be. Who knows? All of this is an option, except Chris Evans isn't coming back. But you know what I'm saying. Hedy Lamarr line is a highlight. I'm going to talk about that in the Easter egg section. The Hedy Lamarr line was genius. I thought that was a really clever way to do a lot of things. The end 2011 setup is fun. We got Steve getting buckied and Peggy getting trapped differently than Steve for 70 years. This seems to have Nick Fury plucking her from that dimension beside Clint. So I think it was a very intentional thing. It looks like he was able to save her. I think there was some sort of device use, some sort of skill. I've seen a lot of people think it was an accident that she came through. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. I think Nick Fury was able to retrieve Captain Carter. What intrigues me is that now Steve and Bucky got to live out their lives together till the end of the line. They got to be bros. They got to be best friends till the end of the line. And now Peggy's going to be visiting a presumably very old Steve Rogers, if he's alive at all. And hopefully they get that dance. Hopefully that's something we do with the animation. But it was really cool to see how, with all these changes, they still made the Avengers happen by having her 70 years later come out of a different type of Frozen, this time interdimensional, with those tentacles coming out after she's fought very valiantly with that incredible sword. Loved that whole sequence with the sword. I think that was a great way to have a little bit of Captain Britain flavor while being Captain America, because she's wearing the Union Jack, which is very visually Captain Britain, but she's Captain America because that's the character. The sword ties into the Psylocke and Brian Braddock, Captain Britain of it all, which is why it's a very tricky line to walk. Peggy Carter with a sword, fighting a giant squid, and then being trapped, sacrificing herself just like Steve did, just like a Captain America would. Someone that's actually earned that title would sacrifice themselves. She does without a second thought, and then 70 years goes by, so we get the Avengers Captain America, this time with Peggy Carter. Very clever. We are definitely revisiting this universe. I do believe we're going to be doing movie by movie with this Captain America. Like I said, it might be completely different, but this does just seem to be our lead character. This Captain America, Peggy Carter, Captain Carter, does seem to be our lead of the multiverse. It's the first episode for a reason. It's the only one confirmed to come back. All of those things is a really cool opportunity to tell a lot of what-if stories with Cap, and this Cap is awesome. Big fan of Peggy Carter as Cap. And I'm a huge fan of Jeffrey Wright as Uatu, as he does the closing dialogue as well. Not only do we get the opening dialogue immersing us in the world, we get him pulling out and having us leave the world with Uatu guiding us, which I dug. Uatu is, the Watchers are hard to describe, but they basically appear anytime there's a giant event. Anything that's going to change the course of history, the Watchers appear at. So if you see a Watcher, it's bad news. Uatu is our main watcher. He's the one we know most. They're not supposed to interact. They're not supposed to interfere. They're only supposed to watch, and in this case, narrate. And I do think at some point we'll see one of them interact. I do think it's going to be Jeffrey Wright as Uatu, but the Watchers are really interesting characters because the scope of them, it's like a warning sign of, oh no, this is changing perhaps multiversal realities. Big, big deal. Easter eggs, not a ton because it's a what if. These are references to other things, but there's not like a ton of comic book references. They didn't pull from What If comics that much. They didn't pull from specific comics that much, but the Easter eggs I got for you, not Captain Britain, because that name is taken by the Interdimensional Corps of Mystical Protectors, led by Brian Braddock. Brian Braddock is Psylocke's brother, and Captain Britain is an interdimensional hopping around protector of those things and very essential to the comic books. I don't think they can use that name because I think at some point they'll introduce Captain Britain, hopefully played by Henry Cavill. And I really hope they play around with that with the Psylocke stuff, and I'm really curious how they handle Psylocke. So that name couldn't have been used, for those of you wondering, with the Union Jack, why it wasn't Captain Britain, because that's already taken. Just like Captain Marvel, why Shazam changed his name to Shazam. Technically, Zach Levi's character goes by Captain Marvel. The Marvel family is technically a DC property because the name, and there's been lots of lawsuits. You can't call Shazam Captain Marvel. You can't call Peggy Carter Captain Britain for character reasons. Technically, Captain Carter appeared in a Match 3 game called Marvel Puzzle Quest in 2016 before Exiles 3 in 2018. So her first comic appearance was, in fact, Exiles 3, as I said, but technically she did pop up very briefly in a game called Marvel Puzzle Quest, which might be worth more money now that she exists in the MCU. I don't know what Marvel Puzzle Quest is, but that is the first time she appeared. The Hydra monster was inspired by the Obelisk, according to the showrunner and writer of this episode. The Obelisk was that big squid monster in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 that also opened that movie with all the crazy Z-axis 3D mapping and stuff that the Guardians were fighting in there. It is likely not the Shumagorath. They are saving the Shumagorath for Doctor Strange. Shumagorath is a big, big, multi-dimensional demon that we're going to be dealing with, I believe, in Doctor Strange 2. Maybe Doctor Strange 3, but I think at least gets referenced. So I think they're saving Shumagorath, personally. The box containing Peggy's costume includes the label, quote, Howard's designer clothing, like that of a chic London department store called Harrods. Thought it was very, very clever that they had him, of course, the detail work of Howard Stark. He is ever the showman, so I love that little department store lettering and everything else just for the box for her to open for the Captain America suit. The train heist is called Operation Where Eagles Dare, which is seemingly a reference to a 1968 Clint Eastwood movie. I don't get the reference, but that is what happened when I looked up Where Eagles Dare. So I do not know a lot of deep cut Clint Eastwood movies. Hedy Lamarr references, genius. This is my favorite verbal reference. My favorite sequence was the flight sequence. My favorite reference was the Hedy Lamarr reference. Hedy Lamarr was a 1930s movie starlet, so 30s and 40s. So it would make sense for Howard Stark to brag about hanging out with her. That's his debonair movie jet-setting persona. That's Howard Stark. But also, Hedy Lamarr invented what led to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. She was a genius scientist, almost like a superhero. It was like unknown because we didn't listen to women then because dudes suck. So Hedy Lamarr was out there making things that affect us to this day. Right now I'm doing this over Wi-Fi because of Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr is known for being a beautiful movie star, but not a lot of people realize she pioneered what would become Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So I love that not only is she like a superhero, because she had a, not by choice, secret identity of being this amazing scientist, but also Howard Stark hanging out with her. He'd get inspiration from her. They'd talk science. He would it's just so many layers. I love it so much. The fact that they probably did science as well as bone, all of it is perfect. The Hedy Lamarr line made me so very happy. More little details like that. It was like the D.B. Cooper thing in Loki. Just, I love when we can incorporate real things into our story that enhance both worlds. I'm now thinking about D.B. Cooper and Hedy Lamarr more in my modern day-to-day life because of my fictional life. And the fictional world gets more invested because of the real world. Genius writing. It is fun to watch Captain America, First Avenger, the one shot of this, and Agent Carter, and the opening of the Avengers tying into this. So if you had a reading list, like when I recommend comics to people, this would be your watching list. So if you want to, at some point, do a movie marathon and don't want to just rewatch the Avengers, I would recommend the one-shot Agent Carter. I would recommend Captain America, First Avenger. I would recommend the opening of the Avengers, and then this, and then I'd go watch 2 seasons of Agent Carter. That'd be my reading list for this show, and then read some What If comics for fun, because they're really great, but there's none of them that are based on this storyline. Finally, the cast. The official cast list was not revealed, and it wasn't revealed at all until the credits actually rolled. That is incredible to get that many of these caliber actors back to do their roles for the 100th time, and to do it in animation, which is not their wheelhouse. A lot of these actors aren't known for their voice work, and as I said at the top, very different skill set and job. All right, you lovelies. It is going to be shorter when we do these what ifs because there's less tie-ins and there's less predicting how it affects things because they're all kind of isolated. I do think, as I said, we're going to be getting a live action Agent Carter, Captain Carter in Doctor Strange 2. I do think all of these things build to something that does affect things going forward. These aren't throwaways. These are canon. These are actually things that affect the MCU. So keep that in mind as we do these breakdowns. Every breakdown is going to be different. We're going to talk about it. We do edit this down, add some graphics, make it all pretty. My good team over at Armada make this even better than it already is. The Late Con with Coy Jandreau on YouTube is where to watch this after the live if you want to see it with graphics and a little bit cleaned up. That is where all my edited content goes. All right, lovelies, we'll see you next week for more weekly water cooler conversation with What If Episode 2, What If T'Challa Became Star-Lord, with the late, great Chadwick Boseman as Star-Lord, as Black Panther. I cannot wait. Much love, guys. I will see you soon.